Hi. If you're anything like me, you probably sometimes want to know where my shirt is. Maybe that information was mentioned in a podcast somewhere, but how are you going to find it? Are you going to personally watch all the episodes of The Integral Stage and all the adjacent meta community podcasts, hoping to stumble on the information? Don't be stupid. That's too long of time. How would you even know you're checking the right podcasts? Instead, go to the Apple App Store on the internets and get Fathom.fm. Fathom.fm is a meta podcast platform that not only figures out which podcasts you should be listening to, but which parts of those podcasts contain the answers to the questions you're interested in. Fathom.fm is making podcasts searchable, instantly chapterizable, and transcribable, and training up teams of suspiciously intelligent AIs to do the work for us. The digital universe is becoming curated by conversations and interfaced with through automated dialogue processes. So if you want to put yourself in the best position for digital synchronicity and distributed sense making this year, you may have to submit to our robot masters. Ask your doctor if cyborg interfacing is right for you. Fathom.fm. I do it.
Welcome back, you luminous hordes, archaic futurists, transcendental developmentalists, multidimensional post-utopians. You know who you are, or maybe you don't. Welcome back also to Anandamali Nikola Ristic, who was once upon a time on the Integral Stage author series to discuss his previous book, Spirit X. And now he's back to talk about an extension of that work called Playful Presence. What came to mind for me is a scene in one of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy novels. There's a scene where the hapless earthling Arthur Dent asks some nonchalant alien how the universe was created. And they suggest to him he should fill a bathtub with dry sand, unplug it, let the sand spiral out, film this, play it backwards, and watch the sand spiraling in. And he says, is that really how the universe began? And they say, no, but it's very relaxing. It'll make you forget silly questions like that. This book is also very relaxing, and it helps you put down a lot of your superficial, silly questions. The content is nicely spaced out. There's a balance of words and pictures. There's a lovely warm image of a butterfly and a sacred wheel on the cover. It just seems to me that it spontaneously helps you take an easier breath and start sensing your way back toward the more coherent states of attention and feeling that are possible for us. So we're very happy to have Nikola back with us. Hi.
Hello, Layman. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for having me again.
What's the best way for people to buy this book?
Yeah, so a lot of people buy book directly from me. I noticed in spiritual communities, especially people, if they know the author, they like the signed copies. So first avenue through my website. So if you order the book through my website, you automatically get a signed copy, which I like doing and looks like people like receiving. And for local folks, they can purchase book directly from me. And from digital and distant folks, it's available on Amazon in printed edition and in Kindle too. So lots of ways to purchase the book.
Beautiful. The subtitle of Playful Presence is Meditations, Prayers, and Contemplations for Our Time. So what I wanted to ask you is, what is our time? How does this moment, this epoch, this particular beginning and ending that we're in feel to you? How would you characterize our time?
Yeah. And that's important because if practice doesn't address the time, it misses the point. And it has to address the time internally and externally and individually and collectively. So there is quite a task of practice. The present day moment is peculiar. I found it challenging and inspirative or inspirational at the same time. I think for spiritual practitioners or seeker, that's the best way, but that's the best attitude to handle it. But if I try to define the time we are in, I put our time deliberately because I didn't want to put too many labels on it, because as you know, we are at the liminal stage, meaning that we are going from caterpillar to butterfly, hopefully. And we have enough means to kind of survive this transition, but it's definitely tricky, which pandemic totally showed up. So we definitely live in the 21st century. So, we have some centuries under our belt as humanity and as a civilization. We live in some sort of postmodern era. You can call it integral, metamodern, whatever you label you put, you describe, but you also miss the point. So that's why I call it our time. I also call it our time is because it's ours to create it too. Because I think one of my major prayers and wishes and intentions with this book was actually to invite us to recreate some basic values of our existence, of our being. Otherwise, I'm not sure we are going to even make the transition. So we are in the liminal stage. So a lot of old values and ideas are dropping. Some of them are definitely showing up. There is chaos emerging too, and we are in between worlds. I like that metaphor from Zach Stein, and I know use it a lot. But liminal stage is, I think, the best description. And the question then arises: what is the role of spiritual seekers and spiritual practitioners? So first, to acknowledge that we are in a liminal stage. Second is to work on them to contribute to the birth of new values. So I see this new era emerging as a very creative in all the areas. We need to refigure out with economy. We need to refigure out with education. We need to refigure out with everything, including spirituality. So the role of spirituality is to bring about some new values, but also to get in touch with those other areas and to collaborate. We basically need to give a birth to a new humanity. We are pushed into that role, and there is no way back. And this liminal state and liminal stage is interesting, but it's scary to a lot of people. So spirituality needs to help people basically calm down, not freak out, and then take a role of creative agents, because the only way out is actually to recreate. And I think spirituality in many domains can play a major role in that transition, not to mention it's necessary, but other stuff are necessary too.
I like the sense that the feeling of our gives us some agency, because it's very easy to feel like we're sort of passively trapped in this age.
Right.
But we are. It's also ours. It belongs to us, and we belong to it. And it seems really useful to think of ourselves as being the perfect people to inhabit this mood in this period of time. And if you don't have that feeling that you are adaptively fitted to the moment, then it's very hard to begin a path.
Beautiful said, beautiful said. So we need to get comfy in this challenging situation and to see it like a challenge, like an inspiration. It's also like an opportunity to create a better world. It's not easy, but we need to be equipped with patience, creativity, enthusiasm. For me, patience and enthusiasm is the kind of key for spiritual folks. Things are not going to happen quickly, but you need to be equipped with that enthusiasm on a daily basis if you want to first stay in good shape and second to contribute. But we need a lot of contributors. We need contributors on a global level. And what you and Bruce are doing is definitely part of that, and I appreciate it.
The book is broken into sort of three sections around these ideas of meditation, prayer, and contemplation. And you give specific meaning for the book to each of those words. So maybe you would let the listeners know what you mean by meditation for this book, what zone of practice you're pointing to with prayer and with contemplation.
Yeah, sure. So there is the whole methodology and philosophy, why I chose meditation, prayer, and contemplation. First, those are three most prominent practices throughout spiritual traditions. They're all extremely effective, and they all need a major upgrade. So Dharma needs an upgrade. So the meaning of this cover here is that we are going through the stage of transformation, liminal stage, which is the butterfly, but internal teaching needs a transformation too, and global transformation needs an internal teaching just in order to make it to transformation. So that's where meditation, prayer, and contemplation need an upgrade big time, but also they deserve a full utilization. So meditation, prayer, and contemplation been on this planet for a very long time, And I write in book about axial age, how radical that transformation was intellectually and spiritually. And my feeling was, and a lot of people agree, that we never fully utilized the legacy of axial age. There is one contemplation which is really devoted. And axial age was the time of a serious spiritual intellectual renewal on the planet, 800 BC to 200 BC. So you're talking about Buddha, Plato, Parmenides, Lao Tzu, etc. So we really connected transcendence and immanence and heaven and earth. I mean, something really extraordinary happened. And I don't see, unfortunately, a lot of utilization in the present day world of that axial age. So book is in between lies really an honoring of axial age, an invitation to go back to those basic practices invented mostly then and to utilize them in the modern world. So I wanted to give a modern touch to really ancient spiritual practices. I can elaborate a lot why I chose meditation, prayer, and contemplation. My biggest hope is that people a little bit combine two of them or three of them, because what I learned from Integral, and my biggest take from Integral was Integral life practice. When I started doing those practices, it was a major shift. And I work with a lot of students and clients and groups, and students and clients and groups who make their practice, spiritual practice or life, at least a little bit integrated and holistic, have best lives and have best results. So my hope, it's not book about meditation, it's not book about prayer, it's not about the contemplation, it's all about three. If you can combine all of three, it would be really great. Results are better and lives are more fulfilling, peaceful, joyful, and more what I call playful presence. Now, when you write a book as a philosopher, you kind of need to define things, correct? And I'm aware every definition is kind of imprisoning certain concept, but it helps the reader. So I define meditation as the experience of spirit as self-realization. So meditation ultimately is about self-realization. The introductory part of meditation is that it connects us with the world within. I teach on all the levels. I teach very, very advanced practitioners, but I also teach in middle school. I teach mindfulness there. And my major role there is just, okay, let's close our eyes and let's acknowledge the world within. And if they acknowledge the world within, I win because, hey, they discovered it in the 6th grade. So I'm winning. So meditation on a basic level is that, you connect with the world within. Ultimately, you realize your true self. So prayer is the experience of spirit as what I call Tao communion. So prayer is about communion, not necessarily just asking God for things, which prayer nowadays became, but it's a prayer of gratitude, of thankfulness, of praise, of ecstasy, of forgiveness and stuff like that. So prayer is a great practice, but needs the major upgrade. So mainstream prayer is actually very egoic. God, give me more money. God, give me better place to live. It's totally legitimate, but it's a prayer on a very basic level. What I try to came up here in this book is a prayer. It's a transpersonal prayer. And the basic prayer is basically, Layman, you close your eyes, you put your palms together, and you just say thank you, and you just feel it, and that's it. You're not asking anything, you're just connecting. So there's a sense of slight duality. It's you and the Tao, ultimate you, God, Goddess, archetemporal, deities, whatever, and you just thank them or him or she. Just fundamentally thank, and that's it. And it opens your heart and it's very ecstatic and stuff like that. So prayer is a great practice, very present, but unfortunately in a very egoic way. People almost use God for things, and God becomes a servant. And so prayer first and foremost should be thankfulness and gratitude and praise, and then some practical stuff. That was my deepest intuition while writing the book. And then contemplation is also a massive practice. Think of Western philosophy or Christian contemplation, which is actually very meditative, needs an upgrade too. I defined contemplation as the experience of spirit as world understanding in its many perspectives. And that's a little bit Wilberian view. I was really influenced here creatively by Ken Wilber, because by studying and embodying integral theory, I realized how many perspectives there are in the world and how masterful and wizardly feel when you enact with the self and the world all of those perspectives. And I think that's a necessary part of spiritual life. I think self-realization is extremely important, but it's not enough anymore. The world became complex, and if you keep that complexity as a beauty, you're winning. If that complexity became something complicated for you, meaning you're good spiritually, but not good financially, sexually, and socially, it's not a great life. So self-realization is unfortunately not enough anymore. But my biggest hope with prayer, meditation, and contemplation is what I call that the biggest task of 21st century of our spiritual age is accomplished, and that's actually ego transcendence. So I made sure in the book that the reader really has the experience of ego transcendence. For instance, when people meditate to calm down their nervous system and to, slow down and whatever, it's great. But meditation in its deeper potential, it's about transcending your separate self, not fixing your separate self. So the biggest task spiritually, that we have more people and more collectives transcending their egos. As I said, in the liminal stage, so a lot of all concepts are kind of dropping out. So if we look at politically, economically, for instance, the project of United Europe, which is in crisis and whatever, but the idea is great and some of it really works. So they dropped the idea of a nation state, which can be understood in a bunch of egos. And those nation states are now transcended and included into bigger, hopefully more functional entity. So it's the same with individual ego. So individual ego has to be transcended and included on a global scale if we want to move further. And I take it as a very serious task. And we need to be clear in spirituality that genuine spirituality is not about endlessly fixing the ego, but it's elegantly transcending and including ego. So fixing ego has its place, but ego transcendence is the key. And that's major reason why I chose prayer, meditation, contemplation. Those are superb technologies of ego transcendence, which is the biggest spiritual task of our time.
I appreciate how neatly they fit with first, second, and third person types of perspectives. I also appreciate just the invocation of the spirit of playfulness. And I was thinking about how it might be interesting to try to define playful presence by its opposites. What is it distinguished from? So what do you think of when you think of non-playful presence or of playful non-presence?
Yeah. So when I think about something opposite to non-presence is definitely drama. So just it's heavy. For instance, egoically, you have a flat tire, correct? It's a big drama. You watch something on the news, it's big drama. You need to do something, it's big drama. So it's the nervous system that's really freaked out. And it's a very reactive way of being. You get offended, you get hurt, you get by everything other, if that makes sense. When Jesus says, love your enemy, I mean, that's means calm down your dualistic mind, don't be overreactive and scared of the other, whatever the other is. Sometimes it's even yourself in the space of within. So it's the opposite of drama. It's also the opposite of being contracted. One of my favorite meditation is called from a clenched fist to an open hand. So playfulness is always open and creative and opposite from contraction. It's receptive rather than reactive. And non-creativity would be something opposite from playful presence. So when we get stuck in old values, not realizing that we have a divine potential to actually really recreate here our life on earth, we literally have that potential, and some groups are working hard, including your channel. So we just need to tap more into that. And opposite of playful presence is also the lack of any elegance in spiritual practice and life. Everything is very hard to do, if that makes sense. Everything is met with resistance and reactivity. Growth can be, and life can be, a much more elegant affair than what we are seeing now. You know, first you treat yourself with elegance, then with nobility. There is one meditation there about nobility, and Buddha noticed that. And then you treat with that elegance and nobility others and the world and stuff like that, and all of a sudden a radical transformation comes. So those are the opposites of playful presence. Thanks for asking.
Perfect. One thing I really like about that is sometimes when we think about things like nobility and elegance, they sound very serious. So it's nice to be reminded that there has to be a kind of looseness and flow and engagement.
Yeah, I mean, the major message of the book is take it easy, don't be over dramatic. Deep down is all okay. Dive deep down, transcend and include your ego, and then re-engage. And then the magic happens moment to moment, literally. I mean, it's that simple. It's do the practice, transcend the ego, re-engage with the world.
There's a great phrase in the book that I think gets to a lot of this, which is radical allowing. How do you what is radical allowing?
Yeah, well, it's opposite to reactivity, internal and internal. And the ultimate meditation is radical allowing, meaning not allowing any reactivity internally and externally, and then you hit your true self. You hit the ultimate point only by that. You're not going to you're not going to get even close to the ultimate point if you're reactive to situations, internally and externally. You're upset about every reaction of yours, and you're upset about the world. And we are exposed to the world now, literally. There's an overload with digital age. There's an overload 24/7. So our nervous systems are like this. You can feel it. I mean, if you have an empathy a little bit for a collective state of being, it's literally like this. So with radical allowing, you slow down that overreactivity of nervous system and body, and you drop deeper, and at some point you hit that spot where Atman is Brahman, where your individual essence is one with the essence of reality, when we are one with God. And if you don't allow, at least for the sake of practice, what is, you never hit that spot. And then you add a little bit of creativity to that allowing, and that's how you transform the world. The world has to be transformed from a deep and calm and creative space, not from a reactive space. And nowadays, there's a lot of reactivity. Just look at politics, for instance, how much partisanship there is. And in some great spaces, there's a lot of anger, and anger is a good energy, but it's not the ultimate place from which you transform the world. So that radical allowing as a practice, I'm not saying radical allowing as an attitude, because we need to be creative, but radical allowing as the ultimate meditation, when you hit that spot of ultimate creativity, for the lack of a better word, which presence is or true self is. And then you add a flavor of creativity to it, and that's where radical change really happens. So I would say without radical allowing as a practice to realize your essence as the essence of reality, spiritually, there is no radical change and radically new ideas. And I think that's the role of spirituality. I'm fully aware that not everybody is interested in spiritual awakening and presence. It takes a lot of karmic luck to live that on daily basis. It's not an easy task. It's not a difficult task, but it's a task first. There is an effort, and there is effortless. But I think what's necessary on a global state, that we all dive within. That's really necessary. because there's too much freaking out there. And sometimes if we don't do that, I'm worried we are not going to make it.
So the first step in the book is essentially to relax out of the reactive mind. And the form, the aesthetic of the book helps with that. It reminds me of, going into used bookstores when I was a kid and finding like those 1970s Rajneesh books or something where it looks more like a poem. It's mixed with pictures. There's a lot of white space. It's very fun, relaxing style. One of the things I noticed on the subject of relaxation is there's a lot of places where you hyphenate the word relax. You write relax.
Yeah.
Why the hyphen?
Yeah. So when I say relax, for instance, without hyphenated, it's you relax your nervous system and you relax your separate self. When I say relax hyphenated, is you drop deeper into you drop into the being. So relax means you touch the source. And when you touch the source, that's where magic really happens. Everybody needs at least a glimpse, if not to stabilize there. Stabilizing realization, it's not easy. It's quite a task. But I think glimpsing it as a peak experience, it's totally doable at a large scale. And I'm very hopeful about it. And I'm very grateful for all the networks that are allowing that, wisdom traditions, but your channel too. So we are good there. We are strong there for helping people relax, hyphenated. But relax means that ego transcendence happened, hyphenated.
There are lots of different kinds of meditative practice. And they all have some things in common, but there's also great diversity that lead to different kinds of states for people. Mm-hmm. You use the phrase meditative awareness in this book, and it sounds kind of precise. It doesn't sound like you're describing any possible meditative outcome. You're talking about a particular state. And I wondered if you would describe, like, what are the qualities of the state that you're referring to as meditative awareness? What's it like?
Yeah, so it's definitely ego transcendence. So you watch your ego rather than you are wrapped up into your ego. So there is a distance from ego. That's the most important step. Spiritually, you're either wrapped up in your ego, which is okay. Ego is both curse and a blessing. But if you wanna, raise the volume to your spiritual game, genuine spirituality is really about ego transcendence. Each spiritual tradition is about ego transcendence. If you look at genuine Buddhism, genuine Hinduism, mystical Christianity, Taoism, Sufism, etc., it's all about ego transcendence, whether we are aware or not. So the first, I would say, quality of meditative awareness is ego transcendence. There's an ease and spontaneity to it that I really like, which I wish more people experience that. There's a sense of deep peace, and there is a sense of happiness, which I call bliss, which is not related to any outside objects and circumstances. So when I teach meditation and mindfulness on a very basic level, and when I think about meditative awareness, is basically two basic qualities. I mean, in book, I call it alertness and relaxation. But for instance, when I work with kids, it's two things. Is peace, deep, profound peace that relax, which is definitely easy to produce with everybody. And then radical happiness that does not depend on any external circumstances, states, and objects. And I call that bliss. So in Hinduism, there is that three qualities of awakened awareness of true self: being, consciousness, bliss. And I prescribe to that. I would add peace to it because we are globally disturbed. So I think one of the benefits of meditative awareness is peace. But I would say peace and happiness, and in a more strict way, like in that meditation, it's relaxation and alertness. But when you close your eyes, and if you do it right, first you feel peaceful, and then you feel happy just because. And I want people to realize that their happiness does not depend on anything outside. And I think if we do that on a global scale, which is totally doable, I'm talking about glimpsing meditative awareness. I'm not talking about stabilizing there. I think we can expect some radical change. And for my part, I work hard on it. I work with people on all the spectrum. So from young people to old people, from experienced practitioners to, people who never heard of spirituality, young students. It's definitely working. So if we put an effort, we'll have some amazing results.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the getting large numbers of people to glimpse implicit happiness, that's an achievable task for spirituality.
Totally doable. Totally doable. Yeah. And it doesn't take some extra enlightened facilitator. You just train people to feel them themselves, and then they help others doing that. We live in a time where skillful means when it comes to spirituality are truly extraordinary. So it's all available to us. You just collect, and what I do, I just collect from various traditions, spiritual traditions, and then I communicate that on the right level. And I call it meditative awareness. I think it's possible to develop meditative awareness, at least glimpses, without even meditating. So there are practices that are doable, because I notice, for instance, when I work in middle schools, those students, they cannot meditate. They can't sit and close their eyes for half an hour. You're not going to be successful there. But there are practices you can design, and that's where skillful means are important, to help them glimpse meditative awareness without truly meditating. And in that regard, I'm really hopeful about the future of humanity. We are very rich in terms of skillful means, and we have an army of people doing it out there, me and you included. So in that regard, I'm hopeful.
Seems like there are a lot of natural circumstances where people tend to elicit those states from themselves, right? The sunset and the waterfall, certain kinds of natural circumstances. Right. I'm curious how you think about the emergence of mechanical means, let's say, right? What's the future, as far as you can see, for machine-assisted induction of these states?
Yeah, so first, what has to happen is the acknowledgement that there is something like genuine spirituality. So for instance, nowadays we praise Bill Gates and Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and stuff like that. And those are, when you go to schools, those are young students and children's idols, but they don't know anything about Francis of Assisi, about Anandamali Ma, about Ramana Maharshi. It's just not on the map. So the first step would be that genuine spirituality is put on the map of our mainstream society, in education, in families, and in society in general. It's on the margins. The space is getting bigger, but some acknowledgement is definitely necessary. And then second thing would be to, for the lack of a better word, train and inspire a lot of people to do it through facilitation and teaching and stuff like that. Just wonderful thing to do. They need to, we need to figure out how money functions and stuff like that. It's a little bit Wild West out there, but it's a wonderful space nevertheless. And then other fields can help tremendously. For instance, when you think about technology, because you can technologically induce those states of beings of, let's say, peace and happiness. You can do it with virtual realities. You can do it with various apps and stuff like that. So spirituality can hook up with other fields and produce those effects. So, and you can do it now with athletes, you can do it now with a dying person, you can do it now in school. So there's a peak experience market there, which I think is acknowledged, but we just need to do it more. But genuine spirituality has to come to the map. It still didn't happen. And I wrote about that book, the legacy of axial age is not fully utilized. We are still waiting for that. Young people need to know about Buddha, about Jesus, about Gandhi, about Lao Tzu, about Dogen, about Krishna, about Francis of Assisi, about Joan of Arc and stuff like that. And young people should be inspired by those extraordinary people.
I was thinking about one of the things that comes up in my mind a lot is the way we teach children to be very automatic in saying things that are so nice social conformity words, right? Please and thank you. So you can have a negative attitude about that because it's so robotic and superficial, but it's also
Totally, yeah.
possible to deepen that experience and turn that into something like prayer, where thank you becomes the root of an embodied gratitude and please becomes the root of a kind of, expansive prayerful gesture.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that one of the things that makes the difference between the superficial and the really full version is how many of your parts are involved, right? Are you feeling it? Are you making the gesture with your body? And so when you think about, let's say, how do you think of emotion and body being brought to the act of prayer? How do we become more embodied and more heartful in our prayerful gestures?
Yeah. So genuine spirituality is basically an affair of the whole being. So it's very integral. If your whole being is not put into the process, it's just not going to happen. So invite a reader to read this book with the heart or with the whole being. So it's not a mental affair. And that's why I methodologically didn't put a lot of words, because I don't want people to get up into a kind of logic of things, which has its place, but spiritually you miss the point. I have two basic methods when I work with people, when I offer events. For advanced practitioners, how you activate the whole being is what you discover, relaxed, hyphenated. So when I do events with advanced practitioners, the first thing we do is we drop deeper. And after that, I don't care what happens in the space, but I made sure that we at least made an effort to contact awakened awareness, of meditative awareness. So so the first thing to include the whole body is actually to transcend the whole mind body, and then to embrace mind body and the world from that space. It's not that difficult. It's a little bit counterintuitive and it's weird, but it's totally doable as a peak experience. When I work with young students and people who are not that familiar with what I call genuine spirituality, I always start with gratitude. So gratitude is one of the transcendent emotions, or gratitude is one of those attitudes that actually activates and permeates the whole being. Another transcendent emotion is generosity, is a selfless giving. Another transcendent emotion is compassion. Compassion is an empathy, but compassion is a skillful means too. And then my favorite transcendent emotion is actually laughter. So, and that's where playfulness. So, when people genuinely laugh, their whole being is laughing. And laughter is actually a very elegant and funny way of self-transcendence. You don't take yourself seriously. You don't take the world seriously. You don't take others seriously. It's an act of transcending and feels good. So there are so many ways to introduce the whole being, actually, spiritually. As I said, we are not lacking skillful means. And I mean, spiritual market is a little bit Wild West, but there's a lot of good people there. So in that regard, I'm hopeful.
One of the things I had fun doing was opening the book at random. And my favorite, just to give you a little feedback, is the beloved section. And the soft, ghostly image of these heart-shaped helium balloons rising through a black and white faded sky. Just beautiful. It just made me feel fabulous every time I opened to that section.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah. Beloved is such a, powerful experience to have. It's loving, it's ecstatic. I like the ecstasy of it, and it's a radical that relax, if that makes sense. And there is love to it, there is devotion to it, and it's a beautiful form of self-transcendence. It's also a beautiful form of relating, and then it's a beautiful way of coming back to the world. What I try to establish in book with the player, that you have a transcendent friend. We have friends, we have a spiritual sangha, in the physical world, But it's great to have a Sangha in a subtle and transcendent world. So through prayer, you establish the connection with the Tao, but with the whole archetypal realm. And then you live here, but you also live here. So you belong there and you belong here, and then you connect the two, etc. But yeah, but beloved, every prayer that includes the beloved, so powerful. It's you're melting into the sweetness of existence. And bhakti is an amazing energy. And they realize that in Hinduism, and I love it. It's just that loving relationship to the divine as a person. It's extraordinary energy and very elegant and playful way of ego transcendence. So I'm glad you liked it. Thank you.
I know that place is important to you, but it seems like there's a tendency in spiritual communication since the axial age to put a lot of our words toward wisdom traditions socially and how our interior individual experience is going, and not to put as many towards lands and elements and nature and things like that. Where does the indigenous spirit of ecology and place as a full partner in our spiritual life, where does that come into the emerging future of spiritual communication?
Yeah, I would say at certain point in your spiritual growth, it can be the beginning or middle or the end and stuff like that. The place is really the key. And the place, nowadays we can say place is clearly geographical. There's a physical location. It's very important to have a good culture when you naturally are. And it's also very important to have some virtual connections, which is possible nowadays from everywhere in the world. It's important. In other words, it's important to have a Wi-Fi. So I would say for place, nature is the key, culture is the key, and Wi-Fi is the key. And with culture comes community. As I said, at some point is the key. For some people, they need to start from that place. For some people, they need to arrive at some point to that place. And at some people, they need to be there all the time. I think once you experience this mixture of extraordinary nature, extraordinary culture, and Wi-Fi, after a while, you're not dependent necessarily about it. I think I'm in that stage now. But for me, coming to California was enormously important. And I would never be able to do this without coming here. And in California, in Santa Cruz, I got beautiful nature, extraordinary culture, and I have Wi-Fi, thank God. So I think I'm not that dependent now. So we'll see how my life unfolds in terms of location. We'll be in touch. But I'm honest with you, at some point, it was really the key. I needed that click. I needed that synergy on a basis. So it's good to experience that synergy if it's possible. I would say 3 to 5 years. You get kind of used to it, and then you are not dependent upon it. Without it, it's hard to have major spiritual results. It's not easy to contribute. You need to this, synergy of things so that you can give. You can give your highest gifts. When I live in Serbia in war, all of my efforts were how I'm going to find food and when I'm going to go to get a little bit heat because it was so cold. So, it's not the most functional location for writing books. But, here in Santa Cruz, it's so beautiful. You get inspired and I just go home and I just type and I'm like, wow. But, it was an amazing sunset or whatever. But location, place, it's very important.
I appreciated what you were saying earlier about the importance of spiritual education. It does seem like it makes a big difference whether people learn about, especially as children, that there are people who have been trying to do these things and what is it they were trying to do. And that very often gives us each a somewhat shared and somewhat unique sense of the major players in our own minds who represent these things for us.
Correct.
You have a section on universal praise where there's praise in Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, the Dalai Lama. And that's a very nice feeling about that group. But I'm curious how you recommend people handle that part of them that wants to critically deconstruct that, right? If you're a Muslim and you're like, hey, why isn't Muhammad on this list? Or you just watched a documentary and it turns out the Dalai Lama is a sex pervert who punches puppies, or right? There's all these kind of things that might come up in our intelligence to be like, I don't know about this list. How do we handle that response in a playful and skillful and spiritually oriented way?
Yeah. So whenever we get over judgmental, I would say, and when we take things personally, and when we get a little bit offended and stuff like that, I usually suggest students and clients, you just slow down, you take a few breaths and stuff like that. What I think is essential about this topic, the topic of inclusivity, the topic of taking things integrally and holistically and stuff like that, it's impossible to be so inclusive that you include everything, so I kind of try to be inclusive in that prayer, but clearly I missed a lot of, and I included some questionable characters, and I'm aware of that, if that makes sense. But when it comes to that kind of integrality of things and inclusivity of things, when it comes to spiritual traditions, my suggestion is just do a holistic touch, an integral touch, which is a little bit outside of your tradition. So let's say you are a Muslim and you are struggling with anxiety and depression, go see a psychotherapist. Don't try to fix that with a spiritual mentor from your tradition. So, if you are a Buddhist or whatever, go see a psychologist. If you are meditating forever, try a prayer. I watch a lot of videos about Christian mystics and they're talking about something and I'm like, wow, have you tried meditation? You would never have those problems and stuff like that. God bless them, but the invitation is just, if you're really, firmly rooted in one tradition, that's something to be honored. That's still a part of the stream. But in a global and digital age, there's so many skillful means that can help you feeling better and contributing more. It's almost a shame not to utilize it. You don't need to work with perverts and stuff like that. But there is so much. So get out a little bit, your garden and utilize some skillful means from other traditions, or from the modern world, such as technology and psychology. Those are two massive, and individual freedom too. Those are massive legacies of the modern world that have a massive spiritual impact.
One of the things that I'm always curious about is the role that archaic spirituality might play in future spirituality. And there's a section on civilization in this book, and you talk about civilization starting to emerge around 4000 BC, and of course we keep finding new information that might push that number way back.
True.
I'm very intrigued by prehistorical wisdom cultures, partly because we don't know anything about them, but also partly because they were the source of the traditions once upon a time. What's your intuition about the way of the proto-civilizations and the wisdom of the pre-civilized peoples who make up the majority of the history of human beings?
Well, I'm going to say this. That's a great question. Thanks for asking. We need to keep examining. We need to re-examine it. I'm not sure we got the full picture. So what I like about writing books is it pushes you spiritually and intellectually to do the research. If you want to put something out there and you're responsible, you're going to do the homework. And so when I was thinking about the emergence of spirituality on planet Earth, there's those cave paintings and stuff like that. So what I learned in school was just not accurate. So we need to re-examine all of those early stages of human beings and spirituality, and we need to keep doing that. And when I really tuned into that energy of hunter-gatherers cavings and stuff like that, and when I kind of meditated upon it, when I kind of embodied that way of being, was very different than what I learned in school, which was very limited and whatever. So we need to go there intellectually, and we need to go there experientially. We need to honor it, and we need to kind of reenact it, because it's still the part of the spiral. If this is unhealthy, and if this is not activated, at some point we won't be able to go further. So we need to kind of revisit those roots of human consciousness, intellectually, spiritually. We need to go to those locations and stuff like that. It's like reconnected with your roots. So it's really the key. And I appreciate all the people who do that, all of that tremendous work, from archaeology to technology to spirituality. That's the beginning of the spiral. That's our collective roots. We know something, but in the future we'll need to know more. So it's extremely important to genuinely reconnect with that. And I felt so good after that contemplation essay that I wrote about spirituality on Earth. Something really clicked in me. I felt reconnected with the spiral, and I feel better. My realization is deeper, and my offering is better, most important, in these liminal times. So reconnecting with our collective and individual roots is always one of the keys.
Another thing that's been on my mind lately is how Dharma emerges in an environment of indulgences, right? That most of the production of spirituality and wisdom traditions throughout history took place where people didn't have much access to indulgences. Now, many people have access to a wide variety of super salient stimuli, whether it's food or pornography or shows or clothing or whatever. There's a lot of things where they're amplified in their ability to stimulate us, and this can create addictive loops. It's also become sort of normalized, right? And so the obvious thing is, well, just don't do those things. But it's also the very nature of the culture we inhabit now.
True.
What's your feeling about how a world of indulgences relates to itself so that it starts to move toward Dharma?
Yeah, and it will be great if that happens. So in general, if you look at the genuine spirituality, I mean, this is a rough generalization, but it's useful for this topic. There are two basic paths. So one is more ascetic and another one is more tantric. And so ascetic means it's neti. I'm not body, I'm not mind, I'm not going to eat, I'm not going to have sex, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to live in monastery, I deny the world. And at some point, I glimpse or I stabilize in my true self. And tantric path is you do deeper practices, but everything is the path. So eating meat is the path, sex is the path, technology is the path, and stuff like that. If we look at the history of spirituality, when we come to meditative awareness or awakened awareness or freedom or contribution and stuff like that, we have had more success with ascetic part than with the tantric part. And I met I met actually a lot of awakened people across traditions and in contemporary non-duality. And I didn't see a lot of Tantra there. I'm just sharing with you, as a friend. And honestly, I do think that Tantra is an absolutely legitimate path. It's just the trick here because you get wrapped up into a lot of stuff. But on the other hand, if we look at the global culture and if we look at the moment we are in, we desperately need a spirituality that is actually engaged with the world. I honor maximally ascetic traditions, and I think all of those people in monasteries, they hold a frequency for us, which I'm extremely grateful for. But I do feel that we reach the limit of that kind of spirituality, and we need more engaged spirituality, which means that tantric touch is absolutely necessary. Tantric touch is absolutely necessary. And in relation to that, if I look at my spiritual development, I'm entering more subjective space. Three most important spiritual things that I discovered were contemplation in my early teens and 20s, which was Western philosophy, meditation, which was extraordinary, and then fasting. So fasting had an enormous influence on me, but fasting is a weird practice. You don't need for a day 3 or 10 or whatever, or water fasting, whatever. But then you, from that place, you kind of re-embrace the world in a very radical and healthy fashion, if you will. So the way I see the tantric path is, it's all okay, it's all path, it's all practice, but you need to have radical breaks. You need to really relax. So you need to do digital fasting, food fasting, sex fasting, and stuff like that, and then to kind of re-embrace the world from that, and it's really extraordinary. Otherwise, you're just egoically wrapped up into the consumerism or indulgence or whatever. But I do think, and thanks for asking this, that tantric touch is necessary. That's another, I would say, ego transcendence is most important task. But the next task is to be awakened in the world, to use the world for awakening or for deepening, but not to get wrapped up into egoic indulgence. And that happens when you do those radical breaks and then radical embrace. So you're engaged with the world, but you do meditation retreat, let's say 10 days vipassana. Or you're a techie and you're doing a tech job or whatever, but then 2 weeks you don't touch computer. Or you're eating, you are whatever, but then you fast for a week. Or you are totally wrapped up into sex and it's a spiritual practice, have a break. So I think that's the kind of good medicine for that. But engagement with the world is the key. And I see a lot of that happening. Again, I think we are good there. There's lots of spirituality that emphasizes now various substances, psychedelics or relationships or various engagements with the world. And that's totally legitimate.
In the contemplation section, you say several times, ponder this. And it's a beautiful prompt, but what's the actual procedure? How does one ponder successfully?
It's just an act or very gentle and slight curiosity. So you just, when I was, contemplation is a big word and there are various forms of it. So my twist of contemplation, it's a mixture of clearly cognition, appreciation, and then curiosity and a sense of awe. So that's my twist in spirit X and contemplation. So it's different than Western philosophy, it's different than Christian contemplation. So there is clearly, subject-object relationship. There is contemplative subject is looking at the object of contemplation. And there is a little bit of cognition that you want to know it, but you are not wrapped up into the knowing scientifically or philosophically. There is a level of awe and curiosity about it. What is this? What is the mystery of this thing, object of contemplation, or what is the mystery of existence? So curiosity and awe is really the key. And then there's a sense of appreciation of the world and the human condition based on that. And that's what I meant by contemplation, at least in this book. But when I say ponder this, it's, it's not judgmental, it's not sharp, it's a sense of curiosity. And to me, pondering is kind of, it softens the relation. I didn't say judge this or understand this or even look at this, or just ponder. So it's very important for me that in a contemplative mode, practitioners soften the duality between themselves and the other. So Spirit X, this contemplation, it's very soft. And then when it softens, it becomes unity. The prayer is the same. It's a love affair with God, it's communion that becomes union. So pondering is this soft, curious look at what's in front of your eyes. And it can be done mentally.
I like the way that you use the word code, because it sort of sidesteps the question of developmental levels. Sometimes you use it in a way that sounds like a level, like when you talk about the achiever code. But
I
other
do, yeah,
times, this sounds like the style or shared mood of people who live in a place or like a certain thing. In particular, I like the section on Mediterranean code. I've been very fascinated lately by the Minoan civilization. Very early,
Oh, yeah.
very unique form of European civilization with a mysterious spirituality of its own.
Oh, yeah.
What is it that you mean by Mediterranean code? How would you describe the Mediterranean code?
So weird codes, that's from my previous book. So I in my previous book, I came up with two kind of basal modules for advanced practitioners. It's advanced things. So ways and codes. So with ways, we rediscover our primordial self. So ways leads to self-realization and hopefully stabilizing it. And then codes connects us with various perspectives of manifest world and help us navigate the world and help us actually being happy and at home in the manifest world, which I think is necessary for self-realization too. And the most important methodological thing about the codes is they evoke or enact the sense of self and the sense of the world, which can be changed moment to moment. So there is, it's a playful presence. It's an interplay between it's a functional interplay between self and the world that it's kind of merging into the one with a little bit of add of meditative awareness. So what I mean by Mediterranean code, so you can activate it various ways. You can physically go to the Mediterranean, and the place of Mediterranean, the world, is going to activate the sense of Mediterranean self, correct? Because you tune in into certain food, sunshine, it's slower there, you walk a lot because there's no public transport. It's so beautiful that you don't think about the phone and stuff like that. So codes are about the interaction between world and the self. And in that interaction, a certain world space is enacted or activated. And that's what I call by a code. But what's extraordinary about Mediterranean code, and a lot of people reported that you're not the only one. I'm getting emails daily about Mediterranean code. What's extraordinary about it, it can be activated in so many different ways. You know, you can, I mean, in California, you can activate it easily because it's sunny and it's beautiful nature and there is a little bit of history and that's it. You can have a beautiful dinner with friends and with a sip of wine, bam, Mediterranean code. Or you can walk to work, which they do in Mediterranean. They're doing it very present, Mediterranean code and stuff like that. So, and codes can be derived from our history, from our personal consciousness, for our collective consciousness and stuff like that. But Mediterranean code is one of my favorite. I also think people react to that because, respond beautifully to that because Mediterranean is really stored into our collective consciousness because the birth of many civilization and cultural legacies was there. And every time, Layman, I go there, you can feel it. It's palpable. For instance, when I came to California, first time in my life, the legacy of the 60s, and that's another quote in the book, was so palpable. I was like, wow, the legacy is really alive. I saw it literally everywhere. And when you go to Mediterranean, it's such a powerful world space, internally and externally. It's almost a shame not to reenact it at your will because it's so extraordinary.
It's profound and fun at the same time. I like the invitation to think about codes in a broader way. I guess we're probably at the end of the discussion. I really enjoyed this book. And I appreciate how much you put into each answer. And I sense you as a very coherent presence.
Thank you. Well, thanks for having me, and let's continue the conversation.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to our next one.
Thank you.